Hello everyone and welcome back to Destiny. Yesterday the January update was deployed. This was the first of 3 major updates that is set to massively improve the quality of life, gameplay, and endgame issues with Destiny 2. And I have to say, after playing around with all of the new stuff yesterday, I'm actually very impressed. Things seem to be on the right track, and come spring, things should line up to put the game in a much better place than it's been. Let's just hope that the actual content of Gods of Mars, the second Destiny expansion, is up to the task, which it just might be if we take a look from Christopher Barrett's tweet from earlier today. He suggests that the return of an arena-type activity, like D1's Court of Oryx or Archon's Forge, is set to return to Destiny 2. Of course, those things are still a ways off, but what we have in front of us are some pretty sweet new features. First, we'll touch on the new Masterwork armor system, then we'll look at the new raid armor perks, and then grab your umbrella because we're just gonna get showered with loot from Prestige Leviathan. And of course, all of that accompanied by my thoughts on what it all means for the future of the game. So, without further ado, let's jump into it. Alright, let's go ahead and kick things off with a brief overview of Masterwork armor. This is the same system that currently exists in weapons, but has now been brought over to armor. Each piece has a special perk that grants you an additional 3% damage resistance while you're in your super, and if all 5 pieces of your armor have that Masterwork attached, then you're going to total 15% damage reduction. And funny enough, my first piece did end up being a Masterwork armor, as you just saw right there. I'm definitely not going to keep this cloak, but it does give us the opportunity to take a look at what it does for class items, which unfortunately isn't very much. As you notice, there is no stats with class items, so there's nothing to re-roll. But we do have the damage reduction while you're in your super, so that's really the only reason you would attach a Masterwork. And honestly, depending on whether or not you're already happy with the stats on your armor piece, you may be in for a little bit of a surprise when you realize that simply even adding Masterwork to armor pieces does re-roll the stats, as you're about to see right here. And so, in this case, that was kind of crappy for me. I didn't want it to roll into mobility, so now I'm going to have to spend extra cores to get it out of mobility again. Let's see. Okay, so we're back to resistance. Now, I'm very curious to see whether or not it's even possible for a hunter to be able to roll out of mobility completely. Hopefully we'll get some more clarification from Bungie. I know they put out some more information for that with the weapon system to tell us what's possible, what isn't. Hopefully we'll get something similar to that for armor pretty soon. But anyways, that's pretty much it. I think Bungie did mention that they do plan on releasing more interesting perks for the Masterwork system, so hopefully later on we'll have multiple items that we can choose from when we reroll the stats. I do have to say the 15% damage reduction while you're in your super is not only very specific, but it's not really that exciting. If it's that specific for supers, I would say do something like 25% or even 50%, but of course that would probably break PvP. I'm honestly surprised that they haven't taken the community feedback and made it something that would reduce the amount of time it takes to charge your super, making it more feel like Destiny 1. If each piece, let's say, reduced it by 5%, 25% reduction in charge time for the super would be pretty awesome, and I think a lot of people would be really happy with that. And of course, paired up with the Masterwork weapon system generating you more orbs of light, that would make you feel more like the god you were in Destiny 1, which I think a lot of people are sort of crying out about as sort of a core issue with the game right now. So let's just hope that's in their consideration. But anyways, moving on to something much more exciting and surprisingly effective is the new mods available for raid armor. And honestly, I have to say, if this selection keeps growing, this could be a very cool way to customize your loadout. Let's start with what's available for the helmet. We have 3 available, the first 3 on your left here, 1 for each element, while on Leviathan, activating a Void Super recharges your grenade. That can be very useful indeed, and of course you can pick the element based on your subclass, although I feel like it's kind of a waste. They could have just made it a universal thing. I don't really see the need to have 3 separate mods. But moving on to the gauntlets, we have some actual real variety here, and the first item is called Striking Hand. While on the Leviathan, your melee kills increase all damage by 20%. Interestingly enough, keep in mind, that does apply to the cranium in Eater of Worlds, which actually means that you can take down the mines in about 18 or 19 bullets instead of 23, causing you to need a second cranium. So now you can destroy 2 mines with a single cranium, so that's pretty cool, and it's definitely going to change things up quite a bit. The second option simply reduces the incoming damage by 20% when you melee, and then we have Giving Hand. While on Leviathan, your melee kills have a chance to make enemies drop power ammo, which can be pretty exciting, especially if you consider this does apply to red bar enemies. But I do have to say, especially if your team is lacking a little bit in the DPS department, you're definitely going to want to go with that first option, Striking Hand. As I mentioned, it does stack with another ability that we'll go over in just a moment, and that can be pretty devastating, especially against all of the bosses. Next up, we have the chest piece. For the chest piece, we have a single option, which is not terrible, and that is while Leviathan using power weapons to defeat challenging enemies will boost your power weapon damage by 15% for a short time. Again, this is only really going to come in use if you have multiple yellow bars. I don't really waste my power ammo on red bar enemies, I don't know if you do. So sadly, this becomes very situational and we have no other choices. So I feel like they could have come up with something a little bit more creative, but they did mention that they are coming out with more ideas, so hopefully we'll have some more things to look forward to. But I do think this could have been paired up with Energized, while on Leviathan, using energy weapons to defeat normal enemies will boost your energy weapon damage by 15% for a short time. But moving on, we probably have the most exciting mods for the class items, and those are the sort of Emperor's mods here for each element. While on Leviathan, your ability damage is increased by 25%. And again, you can pick which element you're using with your current subclass. And the reason this is pretty cool is because it also applies to your super. And yes, I'm looking at you gunslinger hunters with your golden gun. If you can manage to stack this with Striker's Hand from before, you can do over 1,000,000 damage to Callus, which is just absolutely absurd. So with that, of course, I had to go out and test out some of these perks, and I have to say I'm very impressed with how much they impact your gameplay. And as you're about to see, we kind of one-cycle Callus, and this is on Prestige, so I have to say, this is definitely a very positive change in pace. This makes it feel like the raids in Destiny 1, and I'm a firm believer in hard mode not being just crushingly hard to kill enemies, but it should be more challenging in interesting ways, and it should still make you feel like a god. Which I have to say, these raid armor perks have definitely begun to do. If this is just the beginning of what we can expect from raid perks, the future of raiding in Destiny does look very promising indeed. And on that note, let's go ahead and switch topics over to raid loot. This is part of the raid reward reworking, where we get a ton more loot. Essentially now doing Prestige mode, as you can see, also grants you the loot from normal mode, so you don't have to run both versions. This was how raids worked in Destiny 1, so it's nice to see it back. As you can see, you just get a ton of loot. And in fact, we get a lot of Masterworks as well, and it finally feels like it should to do the most challenging activity in the game. And again, for clarification, I'm getting both the reward drops from normal mode and Prestige at the same time. And in this case, we did the challenge mode for the Pleasure Gardens, which means you get an entire second chest, which also grants you both loot pulls from Prestige and normal as well. So you're just kind of showered with loot, and that's the way it should be. This actually kind of makes me feel like I'm playing The Division. I don't know if any of you have played since launch, but the 1.8 update just kind of showers you with a ton of loot, and it feels really good. I have to say, I haven't played Destiny very much in the past few weeks, and this definitely felt very refreshing. And now I can come back and purchase the helmet that I'm missing. I do have to say, being able to buy things from Benedict may not have been super necessary, because I kind of feel like I got almost the entire raid set with just one run. Oh, and by the way, this was my first clear of Prestige on PC, so you can see that sort of I kind of held off because there really was no incentive to play before, and just out of principle, I didn't play it, because there was literally no reason. I could care less about auras, but now you get both loot pulls, it feels really good, and now I'm genuinely excited for the Prestige mode for Eater of Worlds, and of course the second raid layer coming with DLC 2. And just because a lot of people have been asking my thoughts on the current state of the game, I do want to quickly just mention that I think it's on a right path. The January 30th update was a massive improvement, and if it's trending forward, we should see a lot of really cool improvements in February and March, and hopefully that will lead up to a pretty awesome launch for DLC 2. Let's just hope that DLC 2's content does actually stand up to all of these new systems and make us feel even more powerful. I'm just very relieved that Bungie has sort of cracked the code on how to make you feel more powerful with these armor mods. They just need to expand the system and make Masterworks feel even more unique, and then I think they can finally get to a point where it feels really good to play. As always, I'm very curious to see what you feel about the January 30th update. Do you think the game is headed in the right direction? Let's discuss. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe for more Destiny content. And I will see you all next time.